On today's show, we're talking about some key updates from Rangers injured hitters and why a Jordan Montgomery reunion actually could make sense after all this time. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Paddock, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Paddock. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into what's going on with these injured Rangers hitters, another surgery for Josh Young, a possible Jordan Montgomery union, and a key World Series streak that fell. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Now, I feel like the most important news happening in Major League Baseball over the last 2 days, well, I guess 1 day, day and a half, whatever, how many days it has been. The Kansas City Royals are eliminated from World Series contention. The Yankees are moving on to the ALCS, and the important reason why that matters is that Will Smith will not win his 4th World Series in a row. But the Will Smith streak still lives. I was thinking about it and remembering, oh yeah, there's also another Will Smith in Major League Baseball. And actually, his World Series streak, if you include the Will Smiths together, collectively, the last 4 World Series championships have been won with a Will Smith on the World Series roster. Now, in case you forgot, the Texas Rangers won the 2023 World Series with Will Smith on the roster. Not playing a big part in the playoffs, definitely not playing a big part in the World Series, but he was the Rangers' only reliable reliever for the first, half of the season. Leclerc was out of major leverage relief spots. He had blown quite a few big saves. Will Smith became the Rangers closer when there was basically no one else. And before the Rangers, he had won the 2022 World Series with the Astros. And before that, he had won the 2021 World Series with the Braves. He was actually traded at midseason in 2022 from Atlanta to Houston. Didn't play a huge role in the World Series in 2022 with the Astros either, but did play a big role in 2021. But the World Series before that, you may remember, the Los Angeles Dodgers won the World Series back in Arlington. So this is the first time there will not be a World Series game played in Texas in, since 2018 was the last time there was not a World Series game played in Texas, which will be the case. Now, I feel like I have to differentiate these Will Smiths. Left-handed relief pitcher William Michael Smith was on the Texas Rangers last year. There is also another Will Smith, catcher for the Dodgers, one of the best hitting catchers in all of baseball, William Dills Smith. Yes, his middle name is Dills, Will Dill Smith. Just a fun little fact. And he was a member of that 2020 World Series winning Los Angeles Dodgers team. So if we go back, the Will Smith streak is technically still alive. As of this recording tonight, the Dodgers and Padres will play in Game 5 of the NLDS. And then if that Will Dill is eliminated from World Series contention, then we can officially say all of the Will Smiths are eliminated from any World Series 5-peat, which is just a fun little fact that I figured start off this Friday podcast with. But the Rangers got some less fun news heading into this weekend, some medical updates, one on Josh Young, the most consequential one. Josh Young will be undergoing another wrist surgery. There is a tendon that has been causing issues with his rehab, and the idea is that they will go in and fix that tendon. I believe they will sever it because it was eventually going to become even more of a problem down the line. This cuts out any kind of questions about, setbacks and rest and recovery. A little bit of a learning lesson from what happened with Corey Seager last year. The Rangers decided to wait it out in terms of his sports hernia surgery. Didn't have that until January, missed the entirety of spring training, except for the final, 3 days or so, and was not good for the first month of the season. They said, okay, we're going to learn from that in practice with Corey Seager's sports hernia surgery on the other side of his body. But I think also with Josh Young, this will be about an 8-week recovery process from all of this. Then Josh will have a normal offseason program after that, head into spring training, hopefully fully healthy, hopefully can go through another spring training without suffering any kind of injury. There's always been some kind of issue with him in spring training, whether it was getting in a car crash in 2023, whether it was the shoulder injury that he sustained years earlier, whether it was the broken foot that he sustained years before that. There had always been some kind of issue with him in spring training. I thought this year, okay, Josh Young is in the clear. He made it through spring training without any injuries there. And then game 4 of the season, bam, broken wrist. No thank you, Phil Maton. And the season is, this was his most injured season of his last 3 years, basically. It was just incredibly frustrating for him for getting back and not being able to stay back and stay healthy. He was incredibly frustrated with that. This hopefully will eliminate the wrist being an issue longer than it already has been, but Josh Young is a huge, huge part of this Rangers team moving forward. I mean, the Rangers really need his bat back in their lineup. Josh Smith did a great job of hitting well and having a great season while Josh Young was on the IL. But still, overall, Josh Young's ceiling offensively is much, much higher than Josh Smith's. Josh Young is one of the Rangers' best power hitters. One of the Rangers' best mashers against lefties, and the Rangers missed him desperately while he was out. The Rangers could have used every single good bat in their lineup this year, and the 80-ish games that he missed before he came back in the first place, the Rangers' offense was just stalled in the mud, and it was clear that every single extra bat helped. Just like the extra bat they didn't have for even longer this season in Evan Carter. Evan Carter last week had what was called an ablation procedure to, quote, burn off some of the tissue that had been irritating his back and limited his recovery process. He missed the vast majority of this season with a back strain. This is the second back issue that he has had that has derailed the season in his first 4 professional seasons. He's still a very, very young man with a hopefully very, very bright future ahead of him. But this year only played in 45 games and was not that great offensively in those games. Still had an elite judgment of the strike zone, still had an elite chase rate, one of the best in baseball. I mean, this guy knows the strike zone better than anybody. And that is a skill that no matter what physical issues may limit him, unless God forbid he has some kind of injury with his eye or depth perception, whatever. Not saying that's going to happen or likely or whatever. That is one of the skills that you are least worried about ever being an issue with any kind of physical limitations with the player. That's something he's always going to have. He always has had. He always will have that elite judge of the strike zone, which is why his floor is so gosh darn high. And we were talking weeks ago. Evan Carter was talking about a month ago or so that they had caught something that they kind of understood why this back injury was taking so long to heal, why he had back issues in the future. And he said in a quote a few months ago, I think it was actually about a month ago, that, hey, I see we have kind of an understanding of why this is happening, and we have a reason to believe that we can fix it and that it won't be a lingering issue moving forward, which is the most important part, honestly. The moving forward with Evan Carter is the most important part. There were questions about Wyatt Langford and Evan Carter heading into the season being big parts of the Rangers offense, not only this year, but moving forward in the future, to the point where if the Rangers did have that kind of offensive regression that they ended up having from 2023, a bunch of guys having career years like Adolis Garcia, like Jonah Heim, not quite Nathaniel Lowe that year, but the year before, heck, even like Josh Young, which I think that the 2023 version of Josh Young pre-injury is more what he's going to look like in 2025 and beyond than what we saw this year in limited stints while he was still, clearly fighting through pain, if not injury, in the 40-something games that he played this year. But Evan Carter is such a huge, huge factor in this Rangers team moving forward. I've had fewer questions about how much of an impact, how much of a potential future star Wyatt Langford's going to be after this incredible 6-week stretch to end out the season, especially with what he did, coming back from that hamstring injury, winning the AL Rookie of the Year or Rookie of the Month in the month of June, and what Wyatt Langford's going to look like moving forward with winning AL Player of the Month in September, as well as AL Rookie of the Month. I think Wyatt Langford is going to be back and better than ever next year. Maybe he's not going to have the near 1,000 OPS he had in the month of September, but still, that is an impact bat. Corey Seager, impact, great bat. Every other bat in this lineup next year, big questions about. Can they be 20% better than league average? Can they be all-star caliber? Can they be silver slugger caliber? Heck, can they even get back to being average? Because a lot of the Rangers bats this year were below average. Jonah Heim, below average. Leody Taveras, well below average. Adolis Garcia, below average. These are guys that the Rangers expected, well, not in the case of Leody, but the other guys, they expected to be well above average to, all-star level hitters. And they just weren't this year. And Evan Carter is a big, big question mark moving forward. I'm hoping that this procedure can kind of mitigate those questions about his back, about, is this going to be something that is chronic? Is this something that is going to limit his career? Because back issues usually are lingering. And when you've had 2 of them before you turn 22, that's concerning. That's really concerning. And, not only just for his health and staying on the field, but just his health in general, the quality of life afterwards. Really hoping that this can be a nice blessing, a thing that is not something that we have to worry about next year, because Evan Carter, if he's healthy and if he is hitting anywhere near what we think he can hit, like we saw him hit in that 2023 stretch run and postseason run, that is a hugely great sign for the Texas Rangers moving forward. Coming up, we talk about one last injury update about Adolis Garcia and another 2023 World Series hero, Jordan Montgomery, and why he could be on the move back to Texas, or at least a move might make sense. Talk about all that and more right after this word from our sponsors. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. I'll be back next week trying to get some guests lined up, including a former Ranger relief pitcher. I had a guest on yesterday, Mike Pialucci of D Magazine, talking about his feature article on the Rangers team doctor, Keith Meister, and his attempt to save baseball from the epidemic of elbow injuries. Really interesting conversation there with him, and interesting feature article on dmagazine.com. Now, the last injury update the Rangers got on this Friday, Adolis Garcia was diagnosed with a patellar tendon strain in his left knee, something he was playing through in the final couple of weeks of the season. He'll need 8 weeks of rehab, and then he will start a normal offseason routine. Good news on him, just getting a normal offseason, seeing what was wrong with that knee. He was clearly, I feel like, playing through something, whatever it was that was plaguing him all season. I don't think this knee issue was plaguing him necessarily all season. There were definitely a lot more factors that went into why Adolis Garcia had a down season than just this patellar tendon strain in his left knee. But good to see him get that all checked out, and note that there's no surgery or anything like that required, and that he eventually, after this 8 weeks of rehab, will have just a normal off season, which is what I'm hoping for literally everybody on this Rangers team. But a guy who did not have a normal off season, at least last year, a guy who will have a more normal offseason this year because he is also missing the postseason. That's right, 2023 World Series hero, World Series champion, Jordan Montgomery. Now, this was a comment made last week by the Diamondbacks owner. The Diamondbacks, after nobody was signing Jordan Montgomery through what I believe it was the middle part of March, just a few weeks before the season, Montgomery was still unsigned at that point. For some reason, he was not offered, or he was not accepting, was not signing a contract. I know the Rangers offered him a contract and wanted to retain his services and probably could have used him this year. Wouldn't have fixed everything. I still don't think the Rangers would have made the playoffs, even if Jordan Montgomery was the version of him that we saw down the stretch after the Rangers traded for him in 2023 and through the postseason. But Diamondbacks owner made a push for Jordan Montgomery, signed him to what ended up being a 2-year deal. First year was $25 million, signed him just before the season started, and did not get his money's worth. And let people know that he did not get his money's worth with Jordan Montgomery. Montgomery had the worst season of his career pretty comfortably. 25 games, 21 starts, 117 innings, and a 6.23 ERA. You look at the underlying numbers behind those, and that's about what he deserved. It was not a good year for Montgomery. He started the season late. He did not have a spring training, did end up making it for his first start on the mound April 19th. So he basically had from the middle of March to April 19th to get ready, and then was just pretty darn bad almost immediately. His first 2 starts were good, and then after that, it was just a rough go of it for him. But the news that was made last week was Diamondbacks owner Tom Kendrick was the one who called for this, who brought in his front office and said, hey, did you see this guy who beat us in the World Series? We could have used a guy like him. And the Diamondbacks talked about how they should have traded for Jordan Montgomery specifically at the trade deadline and said, oh, look at that. Because here they were pitching a bullpen game in World Series Game 4, and their bullpen game got absolutely lit up. And they said, wow, we could have used a guy like Jordan Montgomery. But the quote from Tom Kendrick, the Diamondbacks owner, about him was about Jordan Montgomery and him being terrible was not something you normally hear from owners, and not something you would want to ever hear your owner say about any free agent signing, no matter how bad they actually were. He said, quote, if anyone wants to blame Jordan Montgomery for being a Diamondback, you're talking to the guy that should be blamed. Because I brought it to the front office's attention. I pushed for it. They agreed to it. It wasn't in our plan. When he was signed right at the end of spring training, and looking back in hindsight, a horrible decision to invest that money in a guy who performed as poorly as he did. It's our biggest mistake this season from a talent standpoint, and I'm the perpetrator of that. End quote. That's a horrible look from an owner to say that about a free agent signing, who, by the way, was not their biggest problem, was not even their biggest signing in terms of even pitchers that they signed last year during the offseason. That was Eduardo Rodriguez, signed to a much longer deal. And the fact that the reason it looks so bad, not only of him just saying, yeah, this guy sucks, he's so awful, but it's my fault for believing that he wouldn't suck. That's the problem here. I'm not saying that it's his fault for sucking. Everyone knew that he was going to suck, but it's my fault for thinking that he wouldn't be terrible. What a horrible look. And on top of that, I don't think maybe he didn't realize or didn't care or whatever the deal was, but Jordan Montgomery's deal was not just for 1 year. It had a vesting option for next year. This guy's still under contract. Technically, he has a player option that vested. But with how bad of a season he had and how many other good starting pitchers there will be on the market this year, I cannot envision any scenario where Jordan Montgomery doesn't take this deal. The contract had this vesting option. It would vest at 10 starts this season, starting at $20 million for 2025. Then if he got to 18 starts in 2024, it would get to $22.5 million. So, it's a nice little, $2.5 million bonus for 8 more starts than that. And then if he made it to 23 starts in 2024, he would get that all the way up to $25 million. Now, he finished the season with 21 starts, so just 2 shy, did pitch in 25 games. And, from a purely, skeptical standpoint, you could be saying, oh, well, he's 2 starts shy and he pitched in, 23 games. So maybe that was them trying to manipulate the contract, save $2.5 million. He was just so bad that you very much cannot make that argument. You cannot say, oh, well, it was just for the pure standpoint of manipulating his contract, making sure he didn't get that extra money. But why was Jordan Montgomery so bad? And why would the Rangers trade for a guy coming off a career worst season? Talk about why that is and what could make it make sense for both sides right after this word from our sponsors. This show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to get real money on sports in most states across the country, including California, Georgia, and Texas. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and could you win up to 100 times your money? All you have to do is pick more or less on those stat projections. They got all kinds of different ways to get in on the action in sports. It is the best place. There's also got the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. PrizePicks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my pick hits, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. Now you may be saying, Bryce, what are you doing? Thinking about bringing Jordan Montgomery back here. He's about to make $22.5 million next year. The Rangers are shedding payroll. Why would they add that on? Well, first off, why not? It's not your money. That's my first objection, always. But the main reason I say that is because if the Rangers do end up trying to make a push for this, and I'm not saying there have been any reporting of them doing so, I just would think if I'm Jordan Montgomery, I would not want to be on a team where my owner called me the biggest problem in a year where this team finished one game out of a playoff spot and honestly had significantly more problems even on their pitching staff than Jordan Montgomery alone. And if the Rangers made this trade, they would absolutely make the Diamondbacks eat some of the money on that contract. I'd say probably 10, 12, $15 million if it happened. The Rangers might include a decent prospect, no one of big value, definitely no one in the top 10, but just for them to get off the Jordan Montgomery contract, because there are other guys on their roster who are making more money, other pitchers that have been bigger problems. Montgomery was not good last year, but there were other bigger problems. I mean, Merrill Kelly only pitched in 13 games last year. He had an ERA around 4. Zach Allen pitched in 28 games, but was under 150 innings, had an ERA north of 3.5. Heck, they paid big money to Eduardo Rodriguez, and he had an ERA north of 5 and only made 10 starts that year. 10 starts for a guy who they paid for, I believe it was 3 years at minimum. Maybe it was 4 for Rodriguez, a guy who I was really scared of the Rangers trying to make a push for, that I thought was a bit overrated coming off of a really good season with the Tigers and some good years and not so good years with the Red Sox. I thought that was a scary proposition going for that as opposed to Montgomery. But with Jordan, you look at the pitch usage, you look at the velocity, it's not like any of that was particularly down. He used a slider as opposed to a cutter more last year, but that was his 5th most used pitch. It didn't really make that big of a difference. Still had a good chase rate, but just was not getting swings and misses, was not getting, weak contact. He was getting, his velocity was not great. His expected ERA for the first time in his career, though, was lower than his actual ERA. Literally every other season he's had in the big leagues, he has outperformed his expected ERA every single year, usually by a decent margin. I mean, 0.7, actually almost 0.8 ERA better last year in 2023 than this year. This year was about a run higher, the actual ERA, than his expected ERA. But I think that, maybe just the environment that he was pitching in, the, lack of a normal off season, not only the shorter layoff from pitching all the way through the World Series, but, having basically a month to get himself ready for the season. The reason that spring training is so long is just because of pitchers. The hitters can figure out their timing usually 3-4 weeks or so. But pitchers, they report earlier. Pitchers and catchers report earlier. They start throwing. They start their build-up program, much longer in advance than the hitters really need, because they got to get themselves up to the 100 pitch, at least 80 pitch, 5 inning kind of workload early on. And I think the Rangers may be buying low on him. Maybe just the environment, maybe the vibes, maybe just he meshed better with the Rangers pitching coach, Mike Maddox, than he did with Brent Strom, who was the Diamondbacks pitching coach, who the Diamondbacks actually fired last year. Brent Strom has been one of the premier pitching coaches. It's not like Strom was a bad pitching coach. He was with the Astros for a long, long time, especially when the Astros pitching staff was absolutely incredible at their peaks, having, Garrett Coles and Justin Verlanders and all the other pitchers that came out of nowhere and were really good. Brent Strom was a big part of that, and the Diamondbacks hired him a few years back. And I think that the Diamondbacks pitching staff underperforming was not Brent Strom's fault, but sometimes even good coaches and good players, they just don't mesh. Maybe that was the case with Jordan Montgomery. Maybe a return here could be something that gets him back to form, because it's not like he had always been as good as he was with the Rangers down that stretch and through the World Series. That's pretty unquestionably the best he's ever been by far, but he'd always been reliable, durable. And even this year, when he was having a down year, he was still posting. He was still going out there and pitching every fifth day when they had him in the rotation. Now he was getting lit up. He was eventually getting them deep into some games, but before this year, he had made 30 starts every single year from 2021 to 2023, pitched in 21 starts this year. In the pandemic shortened year in 2020, he made 10 starts then. Wasn't very good that year, but he'd been reliable, comfortable, middle to back end of the rotation pitcher, and having that upside of what he did with the Rangers through that run. I think we forget how good he was against the Astros. That first start of 7 shutout innings against Tampa Bay really set the tone for the Rangers' whole run. Wasn't great against Baltimore in that one start, but against a dominant Astros team, he came in there and he pitched in 3 games, 2 starts, including the first game of the series, 6 1/3 innings, just 1 walk, 6 strikeouts, and he was basically the only person who could get Jordan Alvarez out that whole postseason. Heck, could barely get Jordan Alvarez out this year in the postseason, even though he was basically playing on one leg. Montgomery was a huge part of why the Rangers won the World Series, and I think a buy low trade on him would make a lot of sense for Texas if they wanted to explore that, if they are pricing themselves out of a Nathan Eovaldi reunion or playing at the top end of the market. So I talked about the Rangers' need for somebody who can start a playoff game. You can feel comfortable with that. They have Jacob deGrom. If Kumar Rocker is healthy and looks like we hope he does next year, then maybe you feel good about Rocker. If you bring back Nathan Eovaldi, then you have 2 guys that you feel very, very good about. And then if they brought back Montgomery, which is something I think they very much could do, then you'd have 3 guys that you felt pretty good about. Not only that, but the durability of Montgomery, which is something that I thought the Rangers really could have used this year, with so many of their pitchers starting the year on the IL, and early on in the season, so many of them ending up on the IL, the ones that you needed to stay healthy. Montgomery is that durable guy. But I don't know if this is going to happen. I don't know if it makes sense. I don't know what all would be involved there, but it's something that I think the Rangers should kick the tires on, and I think at least internally we'll probably have contemplated at least a little bit. One last thing before we get out of here for this week, Just Baseball released their top 15 Rangers prospect rankings. Now, Just Baseball is a site that I really, really like. There's quite a few very talented writers there, including their head prospect evaluator, Aram Layton, a guy who did spend some time with the Locked On Podcast Network hosting Locked On Prospects, a guy whose opinion I really respect on prospects. He released his top 15 Rangers prospects. And the thing that I thought was most curious was him putting Sebastian Walcott over Kumar Rocker. Now, I talked with him a little bit about it last night when he published this, and he said it wasn't about him doubting Rocker, although him putting Rocker's ceiling as a number 2 starting pitcher, I had a little bug with. I think that Rocker's ceiling is definitely that of an ace, but he said it was more about how much he was confident in the superstar upside of Sebastian Walcott, a guy who he thinks could be an absolute star in the making. He thinks is a star in the making. He was so impressed. He talked about him cutting down his strikeout rate despite jumping up a huge level gap. That was something that he said was very impressive. The exit velocities, getting up there to 115 miles an hour as an 18-year-old. It's not something that happens very, very often. He talked about the, defense being fine enough to maybe stick there at third base, and it doesn't really matter for him at this point, in my opinion, if he can stick at shortstop, because if he comes up in 2026 or so, when I'm expecting, the Rangers still have a guy at shortstop who is pretty darn good and under contract for quite some time in Corey Seager. But I was really encouraged by that, his evaluation of Walcott, of saying this guy is, potential superstar, a guy who you don't see guys doing the kind of things he was doing at high A, at that level, at the age of 18, and making his way to Frisco before he turned 18 and a half. That is not something that happens very often, and also his encouraging outlook on Alejandro Rosario. I think he had the ceiling a little lower than I am on Rosario, but talking about how no prospect made a bigger jump in the Rangers system, heck, maybe almost anywhere, than Alejandro Rosario did. I mean, an incredible season for Rosario, maybe the Rangers' top pitching prospect. At points this season, definitely. I think at midseason, I had him as my top Rangers pitching prospect, only because I hadn't seen what Rocker was about to do and just go on an absolutely electric run. But one note that he had about Rosario that caught my eye was that he had the highest strikeout rate minus walk rate in all of minor league baseball. That's an important thing. Didn't walk basically anybody and had an incredibly high strikeout rate. That's how you know the stuff is very good. And not only the stuff good, he is trusting to throw it in the zone. The slider, the fastball, the splitter, all of those pitches he's throwing in the zone to righties, to lefties. He feels comfortable with all of them. They are all effective weapons against both-handed hitters. That is something that you have to feel very, very good about with him making those jumps, and not just him, but all kinds of other pitchers making those jumps, from Emiliano Teodo to Winston Santos to obviously Rocker at the top. I mean, this was a very, very good season for Rangers pitching prospects. And the fact that it's not just Rangers prospect evaluators that are, touting these huge jumps in the Rangers' ability to develop pitchers and how good of a season this was in terms of an overall development standpoint from minor league pitching prospects the Rangers haven't really ever had. That's a great sign. It's not just guys who have their own biases of seeing what's happening now versus what's happening before, saying, okay, the Rangers are so much better, but it's outside national guys who see prospects all the time who are saying, hey, this is not just better than what the Rangers have done before. This is just straight up good. That is a hugely great sign for the Rangers prospects. I'll have my Rangers top 30 prospects probably sometime in January, depending on how lean these content months go over the next few months. Maybe I'll end up doing a re-rank in November or October. Who knows? But that's going to do it for this week's editions of Locked On Rangers. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.